All right, we still continue to paying focus on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and in order to have lasting peace in the Middle East, we are continuing to focus on that particular story, and that Israelis and Palestinians will have to go back to the negotiating table. Now, that's according to former British anti-apartheid leader and Labour cabinet minister Lord Peter Hain. In an opinion piece, Lord Hain says tough negotiations will achieve what bombs cannot. His opinion comes at a time when Israel is preparing to defend itself before the International Court of Justice in The Hague. South Africa is accusing Israel of committing genocide in the war with Hamas in Gaza. Are peace talks the only way forward? Well, to discuss this matter further, we're now joined virtually by the former British anti-apartheid leader and Labour cabinet minister, Lord Peter Hain. Lord Peter Hain, a very good morning. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to Morning Live.
Thank you.
Now, before we start with the peace talks, what do you make of South Africa launching a case against Israel, saying the magnitude of death and destruction in Gaza meets the threshold of the 1948 Genocide Convention?
Well, I noted that, but my article is about how we get out of this mess, because the horror unfolding daily in Gaza with Palestinians being pushed into the desert in refugee camps, following the terror by Hamas on October the 7th, when there was that horrible, awful attack on Israeli civilians, Israeli citizens, and we all saw what happened, the murder, the rape, and so on. These things will always happen if you have extremism and violence breeding in a situation and you don't have politics and you don't have negotiation. So my argument as a former British Middle East minister, as well as cabinet minister for Northern Ireland, where I negotiated under Tony Blair a peace settlement there, is that you only resolve these problems by political negotiation. It isn't easy because there's such bitterness on both sides that it's hard to get old enemies, blood enemies, to talk to each other. But it is the only way forward, because Israel cannot defeat the Palestinians militarily. They can dominate them. They can drive them from Gaza, just as the Palestinians cannot defeat Israel militarily through Hamas terror attacks. So there's got to be a negotiated settlement. And what I want America to do, and the UK to do, and the European Union to do, as well as the other important countries of the world to join them, is to get a negotiating process going in which an end to this violence and horror is on the table, with a political solution resulting. Now, that's going to take some doing, and there's no sign of it happening yet, but it is the only way forward, in my view.
And you say in your opinion piece that Israel has no choice but to negotiate with Hamas if it wants peace. So what are you basing your views on?
Well, Israel said it won't talk to Hamas, though in fact through the back door via Qatar, it is negotiating over hostage releases and prisoner exchanges, and that's been going on for months now. So it's not true to say there are no negotiations, but they're only in that narrow area of the conflict. But Israel is saying they won't talk to Hamas, they want to destroy them. Israel is not going to be able to destroy Hamas. They may be able to destroy much of its military infrastructure, the tunnels, for example, kill some of its fighters and leaders, as has been happening. But Hamas is a movement, it's an ideology, it's not just a military force. And Israel's right-wing leadership under Prime Minister Netanyahu, which is now saying they don't believe in a two-state solution, an Israeli state alongside a Palestinian state, but has actually created circumstances in which their own Israeli citizens don't have security, don't have peace, as we saw on October the 7th, when they were suddenly attacked, over 1,200 of them killed. So this right-wing agenda in Israel is not working for Israeli citizens either. Now, I want to see a situation in which Israeli citizens can live in security and in peace alongside Palestinians running their own state and running their own services and so on. Now, we're very far away from that, but there have not been serious negotiations Since 2000, when I was a Middle East minister for Britain and President Bill Clinton convened the Camp David summit with Yasser Arafat from the Palestinians and Prime Minister Ehud Barak from Israel. Now that sadly did not succeed, though it came quite close. But there's been very little since. There's been a lot of fighting, but very little negotiating, and my plea is for negotiation.
Lord Peter Hain, please hold your thought and stay on the line. We'll definitely continue our conversation in a moment. We have to take news now. Lord Peter Hain there speaking to us virtually in relation to the ongoing Israeli and Palestinian conflict. But for now, it is 8 o'clock. Let's take a look at the top stories. Oscar Pistorius will be released from prison tomorrow. The Department of Correctional Services has reaffirmed a decision by the Correctional Supervision and Parole Board last month to place Pistorius on parole. The 37-year-old was convicted for killing his girlfriend, Riva Steenkamp, on Valentine's Day almost 11 years ago, and he has been behind bars for more than 8 years. Correctional Services says general parole conditions will apply to Pistorius. He will be expected to be home at particular hours of the day. He may not consume alcohol or any other prohibited substance. Now, he is also restricted from conducting media interviews. Ocean freight rates are surging after a missile attack and attempted hijacking of a ship this weekend prompted carriers to suspend plans to restart transits through the Red Sea. Yemen-based Houthi militants have been attacking high-value cargo vessels in the Red Sea since November in a show of support for Palestinian Islamist group Hamas fighting Israel in Gaza. Meanwhile, members of the UN Security Council have called the Houthis to halt their attacks, saying they threatened regional stability, global freedom of navigation and food supplies.
During the Council's meeting just over 2 weeks ago, many delegations expressed a view that the Council has a responsibility to help ensure that the free flow of lawful transit through the Red Sea continues unimpeded. Today, in light of both the broad support for Council action and continued Houthi attacks, the United States believes that we are at an inflection point. These attacks pose grave implications for maritime security, international shipping, and commerce, and they undermine the fragile humanitarian situation in Yemen, damaging the ability of the international community to deliver assistance to more than 21 million people in need. It is vital that the Council speak, and speak now, on the need to uphold international law as well as navigational rights and freedoms. Even as we continue to demand that the Houthis stop these attacks, which are clear violations of international law, we must not overlook the root of the problem. Iran has long enabled these attacks by the Houthis.
The world's biggest cruise ship, Royal Caribbean's colossal cruise liner Icon of the Seas, has docked in Puerto Rico in preparation for its inaugural journey from Miami later on this month. Now, the massive ship drew curious gazes from locals and tourists alike after completing a 9-day voyage from Spain without passengers to undergo checks and preparations for its debut journey. The ship has 20 decks with the capacity to accommodate up to 10,000 people. On board, guests can enjoy a variety of innovative amenities, including the Aqua Dome, which houses spectacular aqua shows and the highest waterfall at sea. All right, we now continue our conversation with Lord Peter Hain with regards to, the ongoing Middle East crisis involving Israeli and the Palestinian conflict. Now, Lord Peter Hain, you said earlier on that you are, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is indirectly, supporting Hamas by refusing to bring them to the negotiating table. Just take us through that.
Well, I'm not sure he's supporting Hamas, but the Israeli government strategy is not getting them anywhere, except making things worse for Israeli citizens, the October the 7th terror attack by Hamas, and the devastation in Gaza, which is now causing regional instability. You've already reported just moments ago and through the morning of the Houthi attacks on shipping in the Gulf. There's a real danger with also the incursion, the death of it seems, a Hezbollah leader in Lebanon only recently. There's a danger of the whole region going up in violence. So we're seeing the Palestinian-Israeli situation causing instability in the region and globally as well. Now, there has to be a new way forward because the current situation isn't working. That's why my plea is for negotiations to learn the lessons of other conflicts around the world, which did not end by one side trying to dominate the other militarily. That never works. You've got to get both sides around the negotiating table, however much they hate each other, however bitter the enmity and the opposition and the anger and the desire for vengeance is, nothing else works.
And why are calls for a two-state solution for establishing an independent state for Palestinians not working? And do you believe that the two-state solution is still an answer to the crisis, and can it be revived?
It would be the answer if it was actually practical on the ground and if it was supported by both sides. But the Israeli government has recently made it clear, under Prime Minister Netanyahu, that they don't believe in the two-state solution anymore. They just want to dominate the whole area, and some of them made it perfectly clear that they want to push the Palestinians out of Gaza, as they're virtually doing at the moment, and by occupying through settlers, through illegal settlements of Israeli citizens on Palestinian territory in the West Bank, maybe the same thing there. So the prospects are looking grim. But my message to the global North leaders, principally America, the UK, and Brussels, is where is this all ending?
Yeah.
They are saying, don't talk to Hamas, like the Israelis are saying, don't talk to Hamas, refuse to deal with Hamas. Exactly what was done with the IRA, with the Irish Republican Army leaders after their terrorist atrocities in London and Manchester and Birmingham, and as well as on the island of Ireland itself. Terrible things happen, murders and bombings, and on a scale that, meant the British government leaders saying, we won't talk to the IRA. We won't talk to them because they're acting in a terrorist way. That's exactly what is happening now towards Hamas. And it didn't work in Northern Ireland until there were discussions with the leaders of Republican leaders. Then we got a peace settlement, the Good Friday Agreement, and the peace settlement I helped negotiate in 2007 under Tony Blair. Talking is the way to resolve these problems. Yeah. Negotiating is the only way out of these terrible situations. Fighting doesn't achieve the objectives of either side. That, I'm afraid, is the blunt message. Nobody's listening at the moment, but I hope they soon will, because otherwise this horror will continue to escalate.
Yeah, sure, negotiation may be the only solution to this ongoing impasse. But do you get a sense that there's been serious Western diplomacy on the Palestinian question since the then U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry intervened in 2014?
No. He was, of course, President Obama, Barack Obama's envoy in the Middle East, and he traveled to the region many, many times. But he couldn't get the Israeli government to engage with the Palestinians, and frankly, Hamas were not very keen on doing it either. But where are we 10 years later? The situation's much worse. Look what's happened in Gaza. Look what's happened in Israel itself. Prime Minister Netanyahu has not supported this, has not protected his own citizens, because 1,200 of them were killed in the Hamas terror attack on October the 7th. So his strategy isn't working either. And this strategy in Gaza, by military force, will just create more bitterness, more jihadis, more extremism, and that will put Israel under siege in the future, as well as the regional instability. I think the only way forward, I'm the only one saying it at the moment, but I'm trying to put forward my honest view. I think there should be a regional summit involving, of course, Israel, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Qatar, which has played a background role, Jordan, of course, and Iran, which is a player. Now, London and Washington and Brussels are saying, don't talk to Iran. Well, if you don't talk to Iran, I don't like its policies. It's got a malevolent role in the Middle East and elsewhere, but it is a force in the region. It's an important country, like Saudi Arabia is. You've got to get all the parties around the negotiating table. Very, very difficult to achieve when there's so much terror and horror around, because people hate each other. But in the end, hatred has to be replaced by rationality and by common sense. There's nothing of that at the moment, I'm afraid.
Now, Lord Peter Hain, I see that you have issued a warning to Western leaders, seen across the global south as hypocrites for backing Ukraine, but being complicit in the denial of Palestinian self-determination and culpable in the horror. But you've been very silent on whether the UK Labour Party should be calling for a ceasefire.
I'm a supporter, the point I'm making is I'm a supporter of the Ukrainian people and their right to self-determination, as I am a supporter of the Palestinians and their right to self-determination, alongside Israel's right to security for itself. And that is the priority at the moment. It's not a question of being silent about anything, about ceasefires or no ceasefires. Ceasefires have not been possible now since October the 7th and the terror attack on Israeli citizens. But I would like to see humanitarian pauses and the humanitarian corridors open. But frankly, even that is not the priority. The priority is to get negotiations going. And my message is to the world's leaders to do that. My own party's not in government. Otherwise, I'd be saying that to a Labour Prime Minister as well, as I hope they will be later this year, because Britain's in a terrible state as well.
All right, Lord Peter Hain, great chatting to you. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us.
Thank you.
That was Lord Peter Hain, former British anti-apartheid leader and Labour cabinet minister, calling for peace talks between Israel and Hamas.